In the timeless movie classic, The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy finds herself dropped smack into the middle of Munchkinland, leaving her baffled about her surroundings. But fortunately for her, Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, quickly arrives on the scene with an explanation of where Dorothy has landed and what she must do if she ever hopes to return to the peace and comfort of her home in Kansas. Like Dorothy, we find ourselves dropped into the middle of a text from the book of Haggai, one of the briefest books in the Hebrew Bible, just 2 chapters long, containing the sermons or oracles of a prophet whose tenure was equally brief. If you find yourself wondering where we are and how we got here, just think of me as Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, as I offer up a brief explanation of how we landed in this text and where we go from here. The year is 520 BCE, and it was 18 years earlier that the Israelites, previously deported to the land of Babylon, were released from their captivity and allowed to return to their homeland. Now, to be perfectly honest, their exile wasn't such a bad deal. They were allowed to do pretty much anything they wished. They could build homes, grow crops, marry, and raise a family. So these folks had grown used to the finer amenities of life. But when they were allowed to return to their homeland, they realized they weren't in Kansas anymore. Things weren't at all like they had remembered them to be. Where there had once been homes, now there was nothing but rubble. The walls around the city of Jerusalem had been demolished, now providing the city with no protection at all. And the great and glorious Temple of Solomon, known the world over for its splendor, had been utterly destroyed. There was nothing left to it. And you have to understand that the temple was more than a fancy building at which rituals were conducted. The temple represented the relationship between God and the people of Israel. And so this heartbreaking eyesore is what greeted these exiles upon their return to their beloved homeland 18 years prior to this morning's reading. But since their arrival, not hardly any progress had been made in rebuilding the temple. Instead, they decided their top priority needed to be focusing on their own homes. And so they set to work on rebuilding their homes. But the million-dollar question was, when were they going to get around to rebuilding the temple? You know, the structure that had become a symbol of their relationship with God. Haggai comments on it in the first chapter of this book. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains in ruin? Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much but harvested little. You eat but never have enough. You drink but never have your fill. You put on clothes but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. Haggai was telling them that their priorities were all messed up. They were wasting money on food, drink, and a nice wardrobe while God's house continued to lay in ruin. He warned them that these things would not bring satisfaction that they had hoped for, and they would remain unsatisfied until they placed their focus on rebuilding a right relationship with God. It's a sentiment that's echoed by Jesus in chapter 6 when he said, "Seek first the realm of God and God's righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well." So to their credit, the people gave heed to Haggai and they rebuilt the temple. But the problem was, it looked nothing like the glory days of the Temple of Solomon. And the old-timers who remembered the good old days made a point of bringing that to the attention of those who had rebuilt the temple to the best of their ability. It reminds me of former members of our church who only darken our doors every couple decades or so to offer up their commentary on our church's state of affairs as they see it. Recently, one such former member, whom I have never seen before, commented on how sad things had come to be at this church compared to the good old days when this sanctuary was packed out and with people standing in the back. Now, I know that's nothing but nonsense and an inflated recollection of days gone by. I have it on good authority that this church has never had that kind of regular attendance. But if you give too much credence to nonsense, it can tend to be demoralizing. And that's exactly how the folks felt in this morning's text, demoralized. They had done their best to rebuild the temple with the limited resources that were at hand, and along came folks who outright laughed at their efforts. And that's when Haggai, speaking on behalf of God, gives the folks a pep talk in this morning's text, saying, "Take courage. Take courage, you rulers and religious leaders. Take courage, all you people of the land. Don't stop working. I am with you as I promised. I promised I would be when you came out of Egypt. And my spirit remains among you. Don't be afraid." As Haggai lifted up the memory of their ancestors' escape from Egyptian slavery, he was reminding them that God had been just fine with a tent as a portable temple when they wandered in the desert as nomads before arriving to the Promised Land. And God was equally fine with what they had managed to build. Because it wasn't really a temple they were rebuilding, it was what the temple symbolized, their relationship with God. So what we have here this morning are ancient words spoken some 2,500 years ago to the people of Israel, words that are just as relevant for you and me today. And I don't know about you, but these are the sort of words I need to hear today. I need to hear the voice of God saying to me, "Take courage. Get to work. And don't be afraid, because my Spirit is with you." I need to be reminded not to compare myself with other people or their past accomplishments, but simply do to the best of my ability what God has asked me to do. God has not called us to perfection, but rather to obedience. We don't need to worry about whether it's good enough or not. Just do our best. God was calling the people of Israel to a future that would look very different from their past. And when that happens, there are always plenty of naysayers whose aim is to plant seeds of doubt within the hearts of those who are doing the work of God. The naysayers in Haggai's time would insist that there were other things that needed more attention than the reconstruction of a temple. And they would complain that the future didn't look like the past. But God would urge the people to focus on their work. "For I am with you as I promised, and my Spirit remains among you." In The Wizard of Oz, after Dorothy made the observation that she wasn't in Kansas anymore, she made it her goal to hightail it back to where she had come from. In essence, she wanted to return to her past. And so Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, instructed her how to accomplish her goal. But friends, although we may take measure of our lives and conclude that things aren't the way we would like them to be, this isn't the Wizard of Oz. And despite what you may imagine to be my striking resemblance to Glinda the Good Witch of the North, I'm not. And I'm not here to guide you into a future that resembles the no place like home glory days of the past. We are children of God, called into a future that more than likely will bear little to no resemblance to our past. No doubt we will experience our fair share of flying monkeys. But if we lean into our relationship with God, everything will be fine. And when doubt begins to creep in, just remember God's words. I am with you as I promised I would be, and my spirit remains among you. Amen.